Good day, everyone. My name is Ma'am Ada, and today we are going to talk about our first module, which is the nature of inquiry and research. Before we begin, let's first define some terms. The first term is learning, and learning, as we know, is a relatively permanent change. One way of learning is actually through inquiry. When we say inquiry, this is defined as seeking for truth, information, or knowledge. In other words, we are actually seeking for information in the process of questioning. When we say inquiry based learning, this is concerned with changing knowledge, creativity, subjectivity, sociocultural experience or factors, sensory experience, and higher order thinking strategies. In other words, we are not only concerned with memorizing facts or even with knowledge base, but we must be concerned more of our higher order thinking skills. And so now let's define research. Research is actually coined from two terms. We have the prefix re, which means again, and the word search, which means looking for something. And so when we say research, we are actually referring to looking for something again. And so we can define research now as the scientific investigation of phenomena. This now includes collection, presentation, analysis, and interpretation of facts. And it should line with an individual's speculation with reality. Research is actually analogous with inquiry. Now, how? It's because they are both involved in investigation of something through questioning. However, take note that for research, it actually involves several processes. So, why is research important? Research is actually important in any field of study, and its significance actually cuts across all disciplines, not only in science, technology, engineering, or even mathematics, but as well as in the humanities, in the social sciences, in all fields of in all fields, research is actually very important. And so, I'm going to present to you some of the importance of research. The first one is that research provides a scientific basis for any practice or methodology in any field or discipline. Now, this is very important because an entire system or operation and all these stakeholders or persons that are involved in that organization or institution is actually at stake. And so, without scientific basis, someone may be affected or even suffer. Like, for example, why is it that until now there is no COVID-19 vaccine? It's because take note that in the field of medicine, before a drug or a vaccine is released to the market or even administered to the patients, it must undergo several researches or clinical trials and clinical testings. And so once that they determine its efficacy, that's the time that they will be able to release it to the market. Second is that research is undertaken for the continuous development and further productivity in any field. And so any system um, that will be utilized in any organization must first be tried to see if it has value or if it has improved from the previous system that that organization is using. And so, simply, the research that they undergo or that they do is to advancing knowledge of the different systems that they are using from the past. Third, research helps develop tools for assessing effectiveness of any practice and operation. So, what are examples of these tools that they do? Examples are we have psychological tests, we have the intelligent quotient test or the IQ test, we have psychological assessments, and many others. So, before they are able to administer again these different tests, it still has to undergo some research. And so this importance of research is actually observed not only in behavior sciences or social sciences, but even in physical sciences as well. Fourth is that research provides solutions to problems concerning almost all issues encountered in different areas of work. Now, what are these different issues? For example, why are employees late, for example, in a company? Or would it be effective to give them incentives? So these are some examples of research that would provide solutions to these different issues or problems. Fifth, research impacts decision making. Now, it is actually a common mistake for people to make decisions without solid evidence, not only in an institution or organization, but even in our life decisions as well. And for us to be able to make sound decisions in any organization or even in our life decisions, it actually requires time, effort, and sometimes money to gather the evidence that is needed for making a sound decision. Now, for example, for the implementation of the lockdown during this pandemic. So, how did they implement? Before they implemented that, the IATF actually again undergone some research so that they would have some sound decisions. Six is research develops and evaluates alternative approaches for the educational aspects of any discipline. Now, this will enable the students to gain broad knowledge and specialized skills for safe practices. For example, research can actually help determine whether lecture is better than experimental method, or would it be more appropriate for the students to just listen to lectures and not to do some hands-on experiments in teaching science. Now, what are the aims of research? Aside from the different importance of research, of course, we need to know also the different aims of research. Aside from its goal to improve the quality of life, research actually has different aims. The first one is the verification of existing knowledge. Research is aimed at verifying or proving the veracity of existing theories or even knowledge. And when these theories are verified, it can actually lead to the development of new ideas. It could also strengthen a current knowledge or even debunk an existing theory. For example, we have the theory of spontaneous generation. If you remember this theory, people before believed that life would come out of nothing. For example, is from meat. So when they put meat outside, they would notice that maggots would come out. And so from there, they concluded that life can actually come from nothing or out of nothing. However, this theory was debunked because one particular person researched on this particular theory where he put meat inside a jar and covered it, and then he put another meat in another jar and left it open. And then after several days, he noticed that the meat without cover is the only one that produced some maggots. So what does this mean? The maggots actually come from the eggs of flies that would land on the meat. And so because of this research procedure that he was able to do, they were able to debunk the theory of spontaneous generation. Second is acquisition of new knowledge. Now, aside from strengthening the veracity of a theory, research would also bring forth new ideas regarding a theory or even create a totally new theory. One example of this is during the ancient Greeks' time, including Aristotle and Ptolemy, of course, they proposed the geocentric theory, and this assumed that the Earth is the center of the universe. However, this theory was later on replaced by Copernicus' heliocentric theory. And when we say heliocentric, it's not actually the Earth that is the center of the solar system or the universe, but rather it is the Sun. And later on, this was verified by Galileo's empirical observations by using his own telescope. Next is we have the application of new knowledge. Now, once new ideas or innovations are proven true, of course, they are now utilized and applied or translated to something useful to humankind. Remember that the ultimate goal of research is, of course, to alleviate people's quality of life. One example here is, of course, the Wilbur and the Wright brothers, who were able to research on the wings of birds, and um, they were able to make a vehicle that has wings, and so we now have the airplane. Now the fourth one is advancement of the researcher's expertise. Now, as researchers conduct more investigations, they actually do not only verify theories or discover new ideas and technologies, but also they gain more experience that will enhance and deepen their knowledge and skills in the area of their investigation. So that's why in your research, it will not only stop during our senior high school, it will continue on to your college degree or even masterals and in doctorate. So in your college, you will have your thesis. Also in your masterals, you still have your thesis. And if you want to pursue your doctorate or your even your postdoctorate, you will still have your dissertation. So in the process, you become experts of a particular area, and you would gain the respect of your fellow researchers. Of course, that would be a recognition that may bring you to the who's of who in the world of research. Now let's talk about the research process. As I have mentioned earlier, inquiry and research may be analogous, but they are different because in research, it actually involves several steps or a process. And so, what are the steps in the research process? The first one is we need to define the problem. And so, we need to select a topic for research. And we will be teaching you for the next few lessons that we will be having how to select your topic of interest. After you selected your topic, you now have to review the literature. Now, why is this important? It's because you need to familiarize yourself with existing research on the topic. And when you review your literature, this is where you find out if the topic that you have selected is actually already done, or is there something to improve with the topic that you want to study. And also in the review of the literature, this is where you find out the different methodologies that these different researchers have done in their research. Why is this again important? It's because this is now what you need to do the third process, which is selecting a research design. So once that you have reviewed all the literature, you have now defined your problem, the topic that you want to learn, or you want to study, then you are now able to select a research design, and this is where you choose one or more research methods. So, will your research be experimental? Will you do some survey, some observation? So, again, you will be able to know that by reviewing the literature. Next is you will formulate a hypothesis. So, in the formulation of your hypothesis, this is now where you decide what you want to test. So, what is the relationship among the variables that you are going to test in your study? And then after that, the after you have decided that the hypotheses, the variables, and the methodologies that you want to study, you now carry out the research. And this time, this is where you are going to collect your data, and this is also where you are going to record your information. And once that you have completed the collection of data, you now interpret the results based on the data that you have collected. So you are now going to work out some implications. Why are your data, or why is the data high, or why did you get some low data or low results from your collection of data? So this is where you now imply and interpret. And then afterwards, you now report the research findings. So what's the significance of your research? So why is it important? How is it going to improve our life? And also, how is it related to previous findings based on the literature that you have studied or reviewed. And then finally, you will now repeat your findings. And again, why do we need to repeat? It's because after you have presented your research, this is where it will spark the interest of other researchers, and perhaps they would be able to do a further research on your previous research. And so they will now be able to repeat your data gathering or your research. Finally, let's talk about the characteristics of research. And for us to be able to memorize this better, we will use the acrostic CLEAR MC. C will stand for critical, and a research must exhibit careful and precise judgment by the researcher. L for logical, which means that the research is based on valid procedures and principles. E for empirical, which means that research will be based on direct experience or observation by the researcher. A for analytical, because the research should utilize proven analytical procedures in gathering the data, whether it will be historical, descriptive, or even experimental research. R should be replicability, because the research design and procedures are replicated or repeated to enable the researcher to arrive at valid and conclusive results. You will later on learn how to do replication in all your treatments. M for methodical, because the research is conducted in a methodical manner without bias, and the researcher should use systematic method and procedures. And finally, cyclical, because research is a cyclical process, and because it will start with a problem, and of course, it will also end with another problem.